Hello guys, do not worry, do not adjust your sets, your eyes do not deceive you. This is the final video in my Avro York build. It is finally finished. This of course has been quite a long process. My first video on this Avro York was in April 2024 and the last video I did on it was in August 2024. So the last video was still 12 months ago. In that last video you would have seen that I gave the aircraft the basic paint scheme. And then in a more recent video on using my Cricut machine for paint masks, I showed you how I painted the tail codes and so on. And that looked okay, and then I got around to trying to paint that black pinstripe along the side of the red main stripe, and it just looked bad. I couldn't get it the way I wanted it. I had lots of overspray. I wasn't really happy with the choice of colours on the aircraft, and so I decided to bin that and start again. So I reprimed everything with a grey primer, gave it a bit of a sand to improve the surface, and this time when I painted it I took into account more the masking that would be required and the order of the paints. So I painted most of the aircraft white. Even the tail, which is black, I painted white because it has some white stripes on it. And then I immediately masked off all of those areas that will be white. And to keep things simple, I didn't necessarily use the accurate width of the stripe. It's hard to find that out anyway, but instead I just used a strip of Tamiya tape and however wide that was. Here you can see that I've masked off the entire top of the aircraft because that will all be white. And then I decided to do the red stripe next down the side. The problem I had with the red stripe last time is I put it over grey primer and it wasn't very vibrant, so this time it went straight over the white. I then masked that red stripe off using some 10mm Tamiya masking tape. And a bit like the Prince of Wales where I decided that the photo etch was holding me up, so I binned it, here I realised that the black pinstripe was holding me up here and really putting me off continuing with this model, so again I decided to bin that and just do a red stripe. To be honest, I don't think the black pinstripe is that big on the real aircraft, and if it was 1mm wide on my model it would have to be 72mm on the real aircraft, and I'm not sure it is that wide. Once the red was masked off I decided to paint the underside of the aircraft. And again, I made my life easier here by using an out-of-the-bottle Tamiya mix, XF19, rather than trying to mix my own grey and then running out of paint or something. And I do think that looks pretty decent. Certainly better than my first attempt. So at this stage, the upper and lower fuselage have been painted, and the wings have been painted in that XF19 grey. Now the York does have those sort of bluey grey markings around the engines, so they were next to be masked off. If it looks like I'm going a bit over the top here on the masking, well, I suppose I am to an extent, but it's really easy to get overspray. You've got to go at so many different angles to paint these engines. I really don't want a bit of blue going over the white of the body, or worse, blue going over the white, the grey and the red of the body, and I've got to touch up 3 separate colours and sort of partially mask those as well. As you can see, I'm using kitchen towel here between bits of masking tape in order to save masking tape. And again I went for straight out of the bottle colour. This time it was Tamiya XF82, which is ocean grey. Finally, in terms of the painting, the black details needed adding. So we have some black bands on the leading edge of the wings. We also have them on the leading edge of the tail, which I forgot about and didn't notice again until I saw the York at Duxford last week, so I forgot to paint those. Sorry. In terms of the tail, once the black was painted I could remove the masking tape from the red and the white. That line isn't super sharp, but it's within acceptable bounds, I think. and I had also masked off a diamond shape for that white background there. I then gave the entire aircraft a coat of VMS semi-gloss varnish to protect the paintwork, and while that was drying, moved on to the details. In my original attempt I had painted the undercarriage in the interior green colour, but it turns out that should be aluminium, so I brush painted some Vallejo model colour over that. You'll notice that the various levels of paint have intruded into the cockpit, so that needs painting again. But before that I wanted to get the main clear parts fitting, and although it's not a perfect fit, it is not as shockingly bad as some things. I did need to sand maybe 1mm off the back of this part, and it's not really wide enough for the aircraft, but there's not much I can do about that, but it wasn't too terrible for a Mach 2 kit. Once I was happy with the fit, I made some manual masks, which sort of follow the quite soft canopy detail. In terms of the other clear parts, we have all of these sort of circular side windows. I had a go at a couple of these, and I figured that not only were they really thick, but sanding them down to a perfect circle to get them into place, while not sanding them down too much and therefore having them go into the fuselage, was going to be too much of a difficult job, and I was going to end up making a mess of it. So again, I went pragmatic and I left the window glazing out. In all the excitement, I had forgotten to add these air intakes to the side of the engines, so these were cut out, sanded and painted separately. And then it was back to my Cricut machine for some mask making again. This time I decided to go with masks only for the large code number here on the wings and the white code number on the tail, because of course you can't print decals in white without quite an expensive printer. On my home inkjet printer I printed out some of the liveries and the logos. I did 2 copies just in case, and I was wise to do so. If you're using an inkjet printer, you can't just put these decals straight into water because the ink will run, so you have to coat them in varnish first. I gave mine some Tamiya varnish from a rattle can. This one I gave a light coat, and this one I gave a heavy coat. And you can see the heavy coat there has actually started to make the paper bubble and go all funny, so it's a good job I did 2 copies. Because the entire sheet that you've printed is decal, you have to cut as close as you possibly can to the decal to avoid lots of extra backing paper. I was really pleasantly surprised at how easily these went down over that semi-gloss varnish. Initially I was going to put the Dan Air London on as one decal, but a combination of the strange geometry and that big gap between the 2 words, which is clear backing paper, made me cut them up. And again, I think that Dan Air in red as a decal looks a lot better than the version I did with the paint mask. Once they were all nicely down, I gave them another coat of VMS varnish, put the components together, and my Avro York was finally finished. And in fact it was finished just in time for display on the Tiny Flying Legends display at IWM Duxford last weekend. For those of you who haven't seen the original video, this kit was supplied to me by TFL, Tiny Flying Legends, to be built as part of their display which recreates Duxford from the 2005 Duxford Air Show. The overall diorama is 32 feet long and probably about 6+ feet back as well. It's absolutely massive, it's fantastic, it's got dozens of aircraft, hundreds of tiny little figure spectators there. I would definitely encourage you to check out their Facebook page, and perhaps they'll be displaying at a model show near you soon. So there we go guys, that was my build of the Mach 2 1/72nd scale Avro York in Dan Air livery. I hope you enjoyed this build. This has been a long slog, perhaps so long that I've forgotten some of the initial pain of building this kit, but actually I really do like this final result. I know I cut a couple of corners there, I know it's missing that black stripe, I know the windows aren't in, but I think as part of that larger display it looks pretty good. And I mean the display itself, the TFL display is fantastic, and those photos there taken by the TFL team look amazing. I'm not sure I would rush towards building another Mach 2 kit particularly quickly, although I do hear that their kits of French subjects are somewhat better. That said, I do have another potential project lined up for Tiny Flying Legends, and of course I've got lots of other build videos and models coming to you soon. So if you'd like to see those, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I always appreciate and enjoy reading your comments below, and I do try to respond to every single comment. Thank you again to Kieran from TFL for providing this kit, and thank you to my YouTube supporters and Patreon members for their ongoing support. I hope to see you in a future video, and until then, thanks again for watching and have fun modelling.